Hello everyone, welcome to this session. So in my previous video, I discussed about few trigger scenarios and we also implemented them. So in this one, again, I have listed down few trigger scenarios, which will go through one by one, and I'll show you how you can execute those scenarios. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. So here I've listed down three scenarios. The first one is prevent an account from getting deleted if it has two or more contacts. So the requirement over here is that if you have an account and if there are two or more than two associated contacts on that account, and if you're trying to delete that account, then you should be presented with an error message that you cannot delete that account because that account has two or more than two contacts. So this particular scenario will implement with trigger. Okay, and then the next one is create the number of contacts that are provided on the account record creation. Okay, so in this particular scenario, what I will be doing is I'm gonna go ahead and create a field on account. Let's say we can name it as number of contacts, and I will keep it as a number field or a text field. And then when you actually go ahead and create an account and you fill whatever the number you fill in that particular field, right? Let's say I'm creating an account and I fill it as 2 or 3 in that particular field, right? Number of contacts. So the moment I hit on save on the account creation page, right? So when that account is created and whatever the number I had entered in that number of contacts field, then that many contacts should be created and get associated to that particular account. Okay, so that is the requirement. And then the third scenario is when a new account is created with annual revenue more than 80,000, add a user as account team member. Okay, so here again, when I'm creating an account, and let's say if I enter an amount which is like 80,000 or more than 80,000, in this particular scenario more than 80,000, if I enter this amount in annual revenue field of account, then I will just pick one random user for my org. Okay, and I will assign that particular member as the account team member for that particular account. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're already aware of the fundamental of account team members or opportunity team members, but while we implement this scenario, I am gonna go ahead and explain that to you. Okay, so these are the three scenarios which we are going to implement in this particular session. Okay, so let's just move to VS Code and get started. So here is my VS Code, and let's get started by writing a function. Okay, so whatever method I'll write here, I'm just gonna call that method in the main trigger. So first of all, before we get started, if you remember from the previous sessions, right, there are two things that we need to identify first, okay, before we start writing. The first one is that on which object you're supposed to write the trigger, and the second point that you have to remember is that you always have to identify the event first. Okay, so here if you see that we are talking about preventing the account from getting deleted, right, if it has more than two or more than two contacts. So that simply means that, like, you will be making an action on account when you want this trigger to be fired, right? If you're trying to delete the account, that means the trigger has to be written on account object, correct, on account trigger. The second thing is that you have to identify the event, right? So whenever you are whenever you're trying to delete the account, that means before delete, right? Because if you have already deleted the account, then this particular error message showing the user that you cannot go ahead and delete the contact will not matter anymore, right? Because you want to prevent the account from deletion if it has more than two or more than two contacts, right? So it has to be written in before delete event. Okay, so going back again to the, I'll start off by writing a method. Yes, and then once we have the method here, we'll just go ahead and call that method into the main trigger. Okay, so prevent account deletion. Okay, and here I'm just going to pass the list of accounts. Now I would have to query on contact, right? In order to get the contact count, right? I would have to make an aggregate result query in order to get the number of contacts that is associated to an account. But before we go ahead and do that, we would want the account IDs, right? using which we are going to query on contacts, right? So what we'll do is we are going to run a loop on list of accounts. I hope you're following it. I am going to collect the account IDs because I would only want to query those contacts which are running in the context of the account, right? Not every contact. So that is why I'm going to collect the account IDs. And before that, let's just create a set of ID and account set or account ID set. Okay, so we have this, and here I'm going to just add the IDs. Okay, so acc.id. Okay, now I have the account IDs. Now what will I do? I am just going to make an aggregate query so that I will have the count of the contacts. So if you are not aware about aggregate queries are basically like, when you want to do a count, sum or max or average, if you want to calculate such thing, you can make an aggregate query. Okay, so aggregate result, and then here I can just give as aggregate result. Okay, and here I'll be writing my query. So I have to make the query on the contact. So account ID, you'll find this field on contact. And then I just want to count. And what do why am I passing the ID? Because I am making a query on the contact and that is what I want to count. So giving the ID is enough. Okay, and let's just give it as like, some alias name such as size or something like that. Okay, so that we can refer it later with this using this name from contact. Now I will apply the condition where account ID in where in this set, right? This is where we have collected all the account IDs for which we want the respective contact counts. Okay, and yes, and one more thing, whenever you are making an aggregate query, right, and you are trying to count something, you should always provide group by clause, sorry, so that like, it can distinct, that will provide a like, distinction to the record. So for example, because if you like, go in your org and if you see one account, you can associate multiple contacts, right? So that is why we need the distinction here, so that like, we'll get to know that which account has how many contacts, right? So by account ID. So here it is, we have the query now, and now we'll because we need the we want to provide the condition, right, which will actually check if the number of contacts are 2 or more than 2 on the account. Okay, so in order to write that condition, before that we will keep the count in some integer field, right? Somewhere we need to store that count. Okay, so that is why we are going to run a loop on this, and this will be the okay, and let me just run a loop on this one. And we would have to create a field where we are going to keep the contact, sorry, the number of contacts. Okay, so integer and number of contacts. Okay, and we can initialize it by 0. Okay, so here it is, and so this field, I want this field to store the number of contacts associated to an account. Okay, so here, so this is, we have to provide the, we can like, use get in order to get the count. So get, and what do I want to get? I want to get the count. And what is the alias that I provided? I provided it as size. So here you have to give it something like this so that you can get the size. Okay, so size, and okay, this is what we have. And you should also like, typecast it, so that like, because the number, the variable that you have taken is an integer, right? So just typecast it into an integer. Okay, so Here it is. Now we have the number of contacts. Okay. And for what we have the number of contacts for whatever account IDs that we have provided. Okay. So now let's just, this is where I want to check all the associated number of contacts, right? So what I'll do is if number of contacts is greater than or equals to 2, then I want to provide an error message. And what would be the error message? acc.add error. Okay, you can use add error function, and here you can provide the message. Delete this account as it has 2 or more than 2 contacts. Okay, so this is it. Okay, why is it giving us an error? Everything looks fine. Let me try to deploy this. Not sure why it's showing an error. Okay, this is deployed. Okay. So let's just have a look at it again before we go ahead and call this method into the main trigger. Okay. So what we have done, we have the list of accounts. Okay. And we have taken all the account IDs, right? Whatever is in the context, because we want to query on contact, wherein we would be providing, we are only going to count those contacts which are associated to the account, right? So here, that is why we have collected all the account IDs, and we have provided those account ID set into the query. Okay. And we are using the aggregate query because we wanted to count the number of contacts. Okay. Once you have the aggregate result, you are just going to loop over the aggregate result, and you're just going to fetch the size that you have gotten out of this aggregate query. Okay. Once you have the size, you're just iterating over the accounts, checking the size, and providing the error message. So now let's just call this method in my before delete. So this is the class name. This is the handler class name. And here I'll just pass trigger.old. Trigger.old. Okay. And let's just deploy this. Now we'll go ahead and see if it is working or not. Okay. So here is my account, and let me see how many contacts does it have. If it doesn't have 2 contacts, we'll create 2 contacts, and then we'll try to delete this account. So it has 0 contacts. Let me just create 2 contacts and then try to delete this account. Okay. So, and save a new, another contact, save. Now this account has 2 contacts. Now if I try to delete this account, so it should throw me this with this message, the one that we provided here. Okay. That you cannot delete this account as it has 2 or more than 2 contacts. So let's just try to delete this account and delete. Here it is, right? You cannot delete this account as it has 2 or more than 2 contacts. Okay. So this is how, so this is just one way of writing this logic. You can write it in much more efficient way, or you can optimize your code. For example, here I've taken list of account, right? Because I'm using here trigger.old. You can also use trigger.old map. So you will already have ID, and then you'll have a map of ID and account, right? And then using the map key set, you can query on the contact, correct? And then when you query on the contact, you can your code will just become to half. Let me show you how you can do that. Okay. So I'm just gonna comment this part, and then we'll implement the other part, other way of doing this. Okay. So here, let me pass map of ID and account. Okay. And here, old map. And then what we can do is, rather than writing the query separately and then iterating over it, what I'll do is I'm just starting with the aggregate query. I will just remove any unnecessary declarations or whatever I've done. So here, what I have to do is, let me just copy from here, aggregate query, and then this query. Here I am only going to change the condition. So let me just copy first and then I'll change it. So this, and here, because you have not collected the account IDs, right, in any set. So what you can do is you can just use this map, and this is nothing but ID and a key and key pair set, right? It's a map, key pair set. So using the key set, you will get the account IDs, correct? So what I'll do is old map dot key set. So I got the IDs, right? So I got the IDs, and now what I want to do is I want to check the size, right? So here itself, I can provide the if condition. Okay. And inside the if condition, what I'll do is I am going to this particular logic, right, that we have written here. Let's just take this one and provide it here. Okay. So now, and we also have to check if it is greater than or equals to 2 or not, right? So that check we can apply here itself. So let's just surround it with another bracket and greater than or equals to 2, right? And once you have that, what you want to do is you want to provide the error on the account page, right? So you have to you have to get to the account. So how you can get to the account? You have to use old map and then dot get ID, because we have to reach to the account using, because we are inside this loop, right? So using this, so AR, okay, and then dot get, what do you want to get? You have to provide the account ID so that you can get the account record, because that is where you want to display the error, right? So inside get, what I'll do is I'm gonna provide the account ID, okay, account ID, and then we have to close this bracket, okay? So sorry. Now let's just check it once. So this is dot get AR dot get account ID, okay, and then here it is, okay, AR dot get and then account ID. Yes, this is fine. Now we can apply add error, okay, add error, and then we are going to add the same error that we have written here. Okay, and that's it. So you can see the difference, right? You can see the difference here. We have written in a very basic way, right? We were getting the list of account, and then we were collecting the IDs and then querying and passing those IDs, right? And then we were iterating again over the aggregate result to get the size. And then again, we had to iterate over the account, list account, right? Because account is where we had to check the condition and then display this error message, right? So rather I used old map, right? Wherein I already have ID and account. So this is the benefit of knowing everything, that you can actually get in all the events, right? If you already know that, in before event or after event, what are the kind of the values that you actually get in a trigger. So if you already know that, it becomes really easy for you in order to understand and identify that what you can use and can be used in the best way, right? So here, if you see, if we go through it again, we are just making an aggregate result, aggregate query. I'm just counting over contact, and I provided where account ID in old map.keyset, because key set is nothing but the account IDs that we have, and then group by account ID, and then I already have the count, right? Count of contacts. So I am here itself, I'm typecasting it, and here itself I'm checking if it is more than 2 or equals to 2 or not. And if that condition is true, then all I'm doing is I'm trying to get to the account. I'm trying to reach till the account, because on the account record, I have to display this error. Okay. So this is the way that you can do it, old map.get, because if you in your map, if you provide the account ID, you will get the account record, right? So here our whole idea is to get the to provide the ID, and to provide the ID, because you're inside this particular loop, right? You are passing the ID of this particular aggregate result, and you're trying to get the account ID. So once you have the account ID, once basically in this map, if you're passing the account ID, you will get the account record. So till here, like, using this, we got the account record, and then we have simply added the error on that account record that you cannot delete it. Okay, so let me deploy this. And here we have already used the old map. Let me deploy this as well. What's wrong? It is same. Okay, old map, right? Let's go ahead and try it again. Okay, I have commented the other part, so we'll get to know if this is working or not. So here, and let's just take the same account. I have two contacts here. If I try to delete this account, it should not allow me to delete. See, you cannot delete this account as it has two or more than two contacts. Okay. So every time you figure out a logic, always like, think about how you can optimize it, how you can reduce the number of lines that you would have to write for that logic. Okay. So this was the first scenario. Let's just go ahead and get started with the second scenario. So the second scenario is create the number of contacts that are provided on the account record creation. Okay, so for this we have to create a field, okay, on account, and we'll name it as number of contacts. So while creating the accounts, whatever number you provide over there, that many contacts should be created on the account creation. Okay, so let me go to the org, and I have already created a field, but I'll show you how I've created the field. This is my account, and number of contacts. Okay, I've already created this field. So whatever, while account creation, whatever value I'll provide into this, that many contacts should get created on the account insertion. Okay, so for this as well, let's just go ahead and write a method. Okay, create contacts. Okay, and then here just give me list of account and list account here. So one more thing over here. So your logic, whatever you'll be writing for this particular scenario, it should not be written in such a way that whatever context you're creating, according to the logic, it should not happen that those many contacts are going and getting created on every account. So you have to make sure that on each account, right, whatever the number of contacts are provided, those contacts are created and are only associated to that account. Okay, so for that, what we'll do, we'll go ahead and create a map, which wherein we can basically have a key pair set, where we will make sure that in the key we are keeping the account, and in the values we can basically take the values from the number of contacts. So using that, we can make sure that whatever account we have and whatever the number of contacts that we are creating with respect to the account it is associated with, the on the account where it is being provided the number of contacts. Okay, so map, then I'll take ID would be nothing but I'll be putting here account ID, and then here I'll keep it as decimal. This one is going to be my number field, right, the number of contacts that would be entered on the account. So let me just copy this. Okay, so I have this. Now I have to fill this map, right? So we'll run a loop on the list of account that we are getting, because from this list of account, there are two things that I want. The first thing is ID, and then also what is being entered onto that particular field, number of contacts, right? So those are the two things that I want from here. That is why I'm iterating over it. Okay, so now you have to fill this map. So map of account dot put. So now what and all you are supposed to provide here? ID and then decimal. So ID is nothing but, as we discussed, right? Here we'll be providing the account ID. So account ID, how you'll get acc.id. And then what else do I want? I want that number of contacts field, right? That I created, this field on that particular in the value pair. Okay, so again, how will I get it? Acc dot and the number of contacts, right? So number of contacts. So now we have a map wherein we have account ID with respect to the number of contacts it is supposed to create as per the logic that we'll be going ahead and writing it. Okay, so here let's first check if the if there is anything in the map. So if map acc is not null, then what do I want to do? I want to basically create the number of contacts as per the field value. Okay, but for that, what do I have to do? So here, if you see, for example, let's say this is account one, whatever account you're creating, and this is, let's say somebody has, whoever is creating the contact, they have provided 3 in this particular field value. That means you would have to create 3 contacts, right? That is the whole requirement. One account, and whatever the number has been provided into here, those many contacts are supposed to be created, right? So let's say if you have to create 3 contacts, then that means on this particular thing, right, on this number, you have to run a loop, right, in order to see that how many what's the number that has been provided and how many contacts you have to create. So you would have to run a loop on that, and you have to keep on creating the contacts until and unless you reach to that number, correct? So that is why we are going ahead and we are initializing another loop. Okay, so here so first of all, I have to get the key set, right? Key set, by key set I mean account ID, right? For which account I'm going ahead and creating those many contacts. So I need to run a loop on the account first. Okay, so here I will, and as it is ID, right? So I will just keep ID, and here you can name it as account ID and this particular map. Okay, if you just take the key set, that's nothing but the ID, right? Key set. So on this key set, I'll be running the loop, and then again, so key set, that means I have my first account. The second thing that I have to check is that how many was the value that has been provided. If it is 3, 4 or whatever number is provided, then I have to run a loop on that and then create that many contacts. Okay, so here for, let's just take an integer I, and let's initialize it with 0. Okay, and then the next thing is that I have to provide the condition, right? So I is less than, where's my less than sign? Less than, and less than what? Less than this value, right? And how will you get this value? If in the map, if you pass the ID, you will get the value, right? That's how you can get the value using a map. In map, if you pass the ID, you will get the value. So here I am just gonna use this map. Okay, and then dot get, and here what should I pass? That I should be getting the value, right? What is the value that has been provided? So here if I pass the account ID, I will get the number of contacts field value that has been filled on that particular account, right? So account ID, from where will you get the account ID? acc ID, right? This is the account ID that we have. So here if I pass the account ID, I will get the value, and then I have to keep on increasing this, right? So this one is going to return me this value, right? Number of contacts. If it is 3, then this loop will run till 3, starting with 0, 0, 1, 2, basically 0, 1, 2. Okay, because it is I have provided less than. Okay, so number, based on the number, is going to run that many times, and here inside this we are going to create the contact. Okay. Here what I'll do, I have to provide the account ID on the contact, right? And what should be the account ID? Account ID should be ACC ID, right? ACC ID would be the account ID, because you're running for this particular account. So it's going to be the account ID. And then let's just give last name, as last name is the required field. Okay, so on contact, last name is the required field. So you have to fill it, otherwise it will not be able to create. Here, what we can do is let's just put a default, some value. And here I'm just gonna add integer value, right? So I'll know that, like, which I'll get to know the count. And then here, let's take a list and keep on adding the contacts into that list. And then we can insert that. Okay. So this is the list that I have, list of contact here, and then I just be adding CON. So what it will do in the first iteration for the first account, when it gets the, like, if it has, like, 3 numbers, so when it starts with the first one, then it will create a contact, add it to this list, and then again, like, there'll be an increment, right? There will be an increment on this particular value, so it will run again, and then the third time it will figure out that this is less than the number that you had, right, for this particular account, for this particular value, the number, it will run till that. And then for example, if it is running for the first one, so it will just going to append that i's value to that, like, contact last name. So we'll get to see something as contact 1 or contact 2. Okay. And then once it comes out of the loop, what we have to do is we just have to insert this contact. Okay. So if this is not empty, okay, if this is not empty, then I'm just going ahead and inserting it. Okay. So insert list contact, and that should be it. And we forgot to put add here. So okay, let's just go ahead and call this method in the trigger. Okay, so create contact, and this should be in after insert of account, right? So after insert, yeah, so here let's just the handle class name. Okay, dot and trigger dot trigger dot now let's just go ahead and check this. Okay, so this is my, okay, let's go ahead and create another account. So new, and then let me just give it a name, and I'll give something in the number of contacts field. Let me give 2. So it should, the moment I save this account, it should create 2 contacts on this particular account. Okay, on this account. Let me save this. So this is my account, and you see 2 contacts are created, right? And this is how we have given the last name. That is why it is, like, giving contact and appending the i's value, right? 0 and 1. So this is how you can, like, implement such a scenario. Now let's just go ahead and see, like, what was the third scenario and how we can implement that. So this one is when a new account is created with annual revenue more than 80,000, add a user as account team member. Okay, so account team member or opportunity team member is something that whatever user you add to the team member, right, they also get the access to the record, and it depends on what kind of access you're giving to that user. When you're adding them as the team member, you can either give read access or you can also give the edit access. Okay, so whatever record you're creating, if you are the owner of that account record or opportunity record, but if you add some, like, few extra users into that account or opportunity record as account team member or opportunity team member. So whoever you add, while adding them, you can define the role and you can also define the accessibility level. So you can either give read or edit access. So once you add them as the team member, they will also get the access of the record that you have created. Okay, so here what we are seeing is that whenever an account is created and if the annual revenue is more than 80,000, then you have to add a user to the account team member. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead in my org, I'll pick a random user. It could be any user as per your requirement, but in this case, I'm just gonna go ahead and pick a random user. And whenever I'll check the condition, whenever the account annual revenue is more than 80,000, I will be adding that user, automatically adding that user in the account team member using the trigger logic. Okay, so let's just go ahead and implement this one. So we'll start, and again, like, in this scenario, if you see, this should be written in after insert, right? The first thing is that it's going to be on account and then after insert, because once your account is inserted, after that you want to insert team members, right? Because it will need account ID. So your account has to be inserted first, and then it will check, like, whether the value was more than 80,000 or not, and then only it can go ahead and create the account team member. So after writing this logic in after insert is because we would need the account ID, right? Before associating a team member to an account, because we should know, right, to which account that team member has to be associated, right? So it has to be in after insert. So let's go ahead and create a method. Add account team, and I'll have here list of account. Okay, and then I want to assign a user to the, like, in the account team member, right? So let me go to my org and I'll just take a random user here from here. So users, and for example, let me take this particular user and let me have Elias. I'll use, because I would have to query the user, right, in order to assign him as the team member. So here, first of all, let me user, and then I want to query. Okay, so select ID from user, where this is a field name. Okay, Elias, this is the API name of Elias field. So I'm taking the Elias, and here okay, so now I'll get that, I'll get that record, right? User record, the ID of that user record. Now all I have to do is I have to first run a loop on the account. Okay, again, if you remember that why we always, like, bulkify the code is because if you are trying to insert accounts using a data loader, like, multiple accounts, it will have multiple, like, accounts. So in that case, it should work, right? It shouldn't only work for a single account, like, when you're actually creating it in the org. It should also work when you're using the data loader and trying to insert multiple records at the same time. Okay, so here it is. Now I have to check if, okay, if account dot revenue, right? Annual revenue. Let me first check what's the name of the field. Annual revenue. Okay, this is the field. So if annual revenue is more than 80,000, right? That's the condition that I put there. So 80,000. Then what I want to do is I want to create account team member, and I want to assign this user to that account team member record. So for that, I will first create a account team member list. Okay, list account team member. This is the object name, okay, for account team member. And here, let's just put as account team, okay. Then here it is, and here, okay. So first of all, I'll create one account team member record, right? So ct team is equals to new, okay. So whenever you actually add an like add an account team member on an account, there are few required fields, okay. For example, you have to provide the member role, okay, that what role that particular account team member is going to have. So that is one thing. The second thing that you have to provide is that who you are assigning as the account team member, okay. So in this case, we have already queried the user and we are just going to tag that particular user to the user ID of account team member record, okay. And then we also have to provide the account ID, that to which account ID that account team member is going to get associated with, okay. So the first thing that I'm going to give the user ID, okay. So dot user ID. And what is the user ID? This, right? Dot ID. So this is one thing. The next thing that we have to give is the account ID, okay. So on account team member, there's a field called account ID. And here I want to give the field as acc.id, right? acc.id. So we have given the user ID, account ID. Now I have to give the team member role. Okay, so dot team member role. This is the API name of that particular field, okay. Here there are few tick list values and you can choose any of them. So let me see if it's visible here, and should be account team member, right? So if I go here and I wanted to show you the role field, the value is team role, okay. So team member role, this is the name, I believe. Yeah, this is the name, and you can assign any of the values, which is so account manager, okay. So let me just give this value, account manager. So account manager and this, okay. Okay, I think I have everything. Now what I will do is I'm just gonna add this to this list, and then we will just insert the list. This is a for loop, and if not empty, right, then we will just insert this. Okay, so all we are doing is that we have queried the user who we want to assign as the team member, account team member. We are running the loop over the accounts. We are just checking the annual revenue. If it is more than 80,000, then I am creating an account team member record. And in that record, I'm providing the user. I'm tagging the user who I want to, and I'm also providing the account ID to which account that team member record is going to get created, right? And along with the role, because this is a required field. So now let's just call it in after insert. I think this is insert, this is after, yeah, after insert. So that's it. So let me first deploy this, and then we'll also deploy the trigger. So first, let me show you if we have the account team related list here or not. A set contacts. We do have, right? Account team 0. Okay. So, and I think I have only called the method on after insert of account, right? So on update, it will not work. Let me show you on insert itself. So new, and we'll give a name, and we have to give a value in the annual revenue. annual revenue, right? And our condition is if the annual revenue value is more than 80,000. Okay, so let me just enter 90,000. So if I save this, then one account team member record should be created, and who should be the who should be assigned to it? This user, right? Davis, the one that I had used. So here, and now let me just save this. So this is my account record. Let's go ahead and check the team. See, it is created, right? So, and if you create another, like, if you create another account and if you provide a annual revenue field, which is less than 80,000 or 80,000, this logic will not work and nobody will be added into the account team. Okay. So this was all about these three scenarios that we have had listed in the presentation today. I'll be creating few more videos on the same, like, trigger scenarios, like with some similar scenarios and few different scenarios wherein we can discuss more about different scenarios and see how we can, like, basically implement them. Till then, stay tuned. Bye bye.